So, public servants blow $31 million of your damn money for zero zip zilch nada. What's going on there? Also, Labor, does it have a multi-billion-dollar funding gap in its policies? Why, this is the long pockets election. Finally, the centre-right guy who gets appointed with no journalism experience to the Post, to edit the Post. Yes, Wellington, here's a Hooton. You're with the Maxim Select Committee podcast. Welcome to Becky and Thomas. Great to see you guys. Let's rip into it. $31 million, Becky. Public servants blew it for nothing. Tell us more.
Yeah, so this is a bungled immigration tech update that was actually meant to assist with border security, and through it started in 2018, and all these years later, it turns out it has not worked. So this has been investigated. Naturally, Immigration Minister Erica Stanford is furious. She felt like she'd been lied to, and that there were specific cover-ups the whole way through this process. There was scope creep, budget blowouts, and anyone who questioned the project was removed from it. So this has become something a little bit more serious, and MB's now been investigated for, I guess, whether there's actually integrity in the whole organisation.
Yeah, because my understanding too is that they split the budgets up so that they didn't have to tell the minister about how badly things were being stuffed up. So that seems quite deliberate, Thomas. I'm smelling the rank aroma of corruption.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for this particular scandal, that is a real question. Were people engaging in fraudulent behaviour? Because there were just sort of multiple steps along the way where things were not fully concealed. And so...
Or fully revealed.
Oh, sorry, yeah, not fully revealed. And so at several points they asked for a budget increase. And under the previous government when this was going on, finally the ministers said, no, we're not giving you any more money for this project. And then the new government comes in and they ask for more money without mentioning they had been denied before, which seems like incredibly material information. I think the big lesson here is that I think New Zealanders we have this benign view of government agencies. Now, the government isn't always, the devil. It can do a bunch of good things, but public sector agencies are ordinary institutions. They are liable to corruption. They're liable to do all sorts of things that are not for the benefit of the public as well. So strong scrutiny is required.
Yeah. I think often with bureaucracies, ineptitude is focused on, but intentional corruption, deception, that seems to be of another level of magnitude.
And the government's come out really strong on this. The Public Service Commissioner has said today that all cards are on the table when it comes to what kind of processes and punishments may need to come out in place. They have to do an investigation, who knew what, when, the kind of the big important questions. But it does seem to be a degree of seriousness that goes beyond government not being fully competent. It does seem like there was genuinely misleading happening.
Yeah, and Becky, I'm thinking, who's going to get sacked? It's like heads must roll over this, because $31 million for nothing is not chump change.
Exactly, and part of the issue is that MB cycled through a dozen project managers, and so looking through the report, it's like, well, how do you determine who's actually at fault and who's to blame? So Chief Executive Nick Blakely joined in January this year, but obviously this project started in 2018, so is it his head who's meant to roll, or is it who was the chief exec in 2018? Is it her head, which was Tremaine? And then she was again appointed in 2024 to oversee the project, but there was also an independent contractor who was involved, who basically kept saying, no, things are looking good, But it's really unclear at the moment who is actually to blame, because, the minister is saying, oh, well, we were given information that things were fine. So it's like, where does it begin? And so I'm glad that they are doing an investigation, but it'll be really interesting to see what it shows, because a lot of people who were working on the project then are now no longer working for that department.
And as a taxpayer, I want to know, where's my damn money back?
Well, Tim, if you're rolling around with that much cash in your pockets, you can't be that hard up. So, maybe the rest of us will get the reimbursement.
Actually, Thomas, you know well, I borrowed it from you for pure theatrical effect, and you will get it back depending on how you perform in the podcast. Let's keep moving. We are actually debating about Labor's Well, Labor came out with a policy about public transport, costed it at $65 million. There were disputes about that, and it seemed that perhaps that was a little bit generous, i.e. Not quite assessing all the costs. National came back and then said, look, we've actually gone through all your policies. There's an $18 billion gap. What's up with that? In terms of the numbers are really important, right? Because you want to know, Becky, if you can pay for a policy.
Yeah, exactly. I quite like what economist Cameron Baggery said, which is that all political parties partook in promise-me-nomics, claiming they could get the books back to surplus, but that all would struggle to do so. And so I think you've got a real issue here with National basically saying, well, where are you getting this money from, and how is that going to balance? And I think I agree with the advice around having an independent reviewer, because to me, just even the word independent, I'm like, okay, cool, they're a little bit removed, and so hopefully, I don't know, it helps you trust a little bit more.
Well, don't we already have one of those with Treasury? I would assume that Treasury does this.
Well, Treasury has to assess government spending plans, but they don't assess campaign promises. So there's the difference. So if the government has announced it as a policy as an elected government, Treasury will run the numbers. But when you're sitting in opposition, you kind of have a few staff who have to pull together some things, but you're kind of on your own.
Okay, so an independent numbers office, Becky's into it, Cameron Baggery's into it, he's an economist. Where do you stand?
I'm pretty skeptical. In part because most of the time when parties are making these promises with their numbers, it inherently involves a bunch of, assumptions and political claims about what is good and what is bad. And so what we have currently is, say, if we talk about Labor and National here, but obviously there are more political parties, but Labor comes out with a series of promises and say it'll cost this much, and then National comes out and says, well, we think it'll actually cost this. Adding a third voice doesn't necessarily provide clarity. It just provides another perspective, because National and Labor will explain why they are saying their numbers are different, and voters, as much as they can, have to assess whether or not they think they're credible. And it's not clear to me that an independent agency will be more credible. They're just a different voice, because we're in the realm of contested facts and contested ideas. And often when you look at, many overseas countries do have these independent agencies. Australia has one. The UK has a sort of one. And if you read those independent agencies' numbers, sometimes you look at them and you're like, I'm not sure the independent agency is really more credible than the parties. It's a political game. I think we have to leave it in the realm of politics.
Okay, I've got a joke for you both. What does an economist who finds him or herself stranded on a desert island with a ton of cans of baked beans do?
What?
They assume they have a can opener. Is that lame? I'm just saying, all I'm saying is that assumption is a big part of where those numbers come from, given what we determine is factoring into this. And look, pulling back, what I think is fascinating about this is that National have sort of set the tone of the debates of what kind of election it is. I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that this is the long pockets election. So it's, if you come up with, okay, we've got this new promises, promise-nomics, to quote Cameron Baggery, you have to be able to defend it. It's an election whereby basically mum and dad are broke. If they're going to promise you lollies, they've got to be able to show where they're getting the lollies from, and if they can afford the lollies down at Pack and Save. So I think actually this shows that National's narrative is supervening and might play well for them in the coming campaign.
Absolutely. I think, being able to frame the debate is such an important part of it. And Labor have very much playing on National's terms, in part because the fact that the government is in a challenging financial situation is, I would say, just substantively true. And Labor is recognising that. The Greens are trying to challenge the framing at all and say, look, we could, a vision of transformational change with a different set of constraints. And so they are trying to offer a reframe. It may or may not work for them, but Labor very much having to play by the government's books in a bad state, and so every new spending promise has to be met by a kind of a revenue promise, a tax promise. It's called revenue when you want to make it seem nicer.
Yeah. And then actually it's interesting too, because when you think of it structurally, it's like, okay, we've got our numbers, i.e. Treasury, and you've got 4 people basically on Google and AI trying to provide numbers. So in a sense, that framing actually advantages the sitting government.
Oh, absolutely. And so in that sense, you do empathise with political parties in opposition who do just lack that staff power. And so if there was to be an independent costing agency, I'd be more sympathetic if it was essentially providing capability and tools to allow parties to kind of, within their policy vision, kind of, give them some quantitative analysis help. That could be quite useful.
Now, Thomas, don't be too reasonable. It doesn't play well for your brand. Let's talk about the appointment of centre-right commentator figure Matthew Hooton to the editorship of The Post, which is the sort of Wellington insider news platform, if you like. Okay, so for people who don't know, Thomas, who is Matthew Hooton, and why is this causing such a fracas?
Well, that's a $5 word there, Tim.
It's actually fracas. No. Anyway, let's move on. Fracas.
So this is very much a story that's quite, inside baseball for tragics. Like it's who really cares who the editor of The Post is and who knows who Matthew Hooton is. So he's a long time, political operator on the right. He got his start in the 90s. He dropped out of law school to be a political speechwriter. And he's long been seen as kind of a political fixer, a hatchet man, a kind of, one of the shadowy suits who operates in dark rooms. But he's also been a political commentator, got himself in trouble many times for running his mouth on political issues. And so, but very much an establishment figure with a long history on the political right, being with no journalism background, being placed in an editorial position. So it's causing a lot of waves in the industry.
And that's the issue, Becky, isn't it? It's like no journalism background. You've worked in the communications broadcast industry. What do you think about this?
I actually don't mind it because I think he's shown over time that although he's centre-right, he's often been critical of national leaders. And so I think he shows he's not a party loyalist. And I also think the general public are kind of sick of people who are loyalists to a particular way of thinking or a particular party, and they just want truth. And so I think someone who shows that they can attack people, not that attacking people is good, but that they can, hold people to a party line and hold the truth as higher than their own ideology. I think people really appreciate that. And so, and then the owner of Stuff explicitly said that the appointment was about someone who understands power and holding institutions to account. And I think he has shown that he's capable of doing that, although he's had a very interesting past.
Look, I think what is happening here is there's a couple of things. One, I think legacy media, which we can say that Stuff / The Post is starting to, I think, let's say, diversify in terms of the people that are feeding into it, and that may be a sign of recognition that there's been an erosion of trust. It may also be a sign that we need to up our game a bit. The other part of this, though, as well, is that the usual standard of someone's on the left, someone's on the right. The lines are blurring. So the standard definitions, I don't know if they apply. Often people will say, well, I'm economically conservative but socially liberal. Although I have to say I don't get that, but we can break into that later. It seems like we're entering a new era, Thomas.
Yeah, I think those old kind of allegiances really are breaking down, and you kind of see that with the formation of the current government with three parties really does show that there are these different schools of thought. And so Matthew Hooton would very much sit in the kind of the what I'd say is fiscally conservative, which means economically liberal. If you love your kind of splitting hairs over terms, it very much wants fewer taxes, smaller state, kind of
private property,
deregulation, all of that. But he is on the socially liberal wing of the National Party, and so that does make for some strange alliances. And then he's, Becky mentioned that he has managed to conflict with various figures on the political rights, notably a former National Minister, Stephen Joyce, and former National Party leader and currently Don Hobson's Pledge, I think, chair, Don Brash, have both sued Matthew Hooton for defamation at various points. So he's not afraid to get in the weeds, to throw some sharp elbows. So if he brings that attitude to the role, that if he's decided, I don't want to make friends, and I think that's how he's operated for much of his career, he's willing to ruffle a few feathers, then his political sympathies shouldn't be a problem. It should be a feature. If he is willing to, play hardball to make the mode shift into journalism, it could be a really interesting move. But it's a swing for the fences. It could be, you could hit a 6 or you could, strike out. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And I do, I guess my note would be that journalism isn't really a profession. It's a trade. It can be learned. But I think it's important who's supporting him. And I see Stuff has appointed Luke Malpass to be his 2IC or sort of safe pair.
And if I was just to add a thought too quickly, I think maybe the landscape is changing a little bit because trust in the media has declined. So I think people are feeling as though many journalists don't stick to journalistic integrity. And so maybe there's more of an open door for, a political commentator or whatnot to get involved, because I think some people are feeling like journalists have widened the scope of how they present information.
And I think also, just to expand on that, there's so much opinion on social media. I think that's affected people's appetite for what they consume on legacy media platforms. So opinion rates. But the 5th editor for the Post in 6 years, we'll see how it goes. We wish him all the very best. Okay. Fantasy Beehive. This is where we pick our top performers across cabinet, opposition, and indeed any other party, and see how they get. Thomas, how does this work? Let's just remind people.
Well, we have a certified, trademarked algorithm that comms guy Josiah has developed. So essentially, we at the start of the week, we pick our politicians who we think might have a good week, and the algorithm scrapes who is making headlines, who is in the body of articles of New Zealand news, so who is getting kind of publicity that's part of the role of a politician. And then also it scrapes Parliament's website. Who is doing things in the House? Are they asking questions? Are they passing legislation? And so there's ways for both government MPs and opposition MPs to score their points because they have different roles, right? Opposition MPs can't pass bills for the most part, but they can ask questions in the House. And so what we're doing is trying to quantify what it is that a politician does.
Yep. Who's up? Who's down? Who's not paying? Becky, give us your top choice, the one that you picked, the one that you hoped would, because you haven't won much recently.
I haven't. I picked Louise Upston. It was sort of like why not? She's been doing a little bit of work in the disability space and tightening things up there. So I just thought, I'll vote for her. But might I add that we vote in advance of knowing, our stories and what's going on in the week. And so just to back up maybe why there's been a loss.
Oh, no, don't start the pee party just yet. Thomas, who did you pick?
Well, we've struck for the first time in this segment a question about the rules because we pick without seeing everyone else's picks. And Becky and I both picked Louise Upston. And while we're in the making excuses game, I would just like to observe it is scrutiny week in Parliament, which means the House is not sitting as normal. So, people perform slightly differently because it's basically they're in committees where ministers show up to be questioned. They don't get to pass legislation. So if one also ends up with a bad score, it's because Parliament is not performing as it normally would. Something different is happening.
It's not our fault.
I'm so sick of these excuses. So I picked Erica Stanford.
Great pick for this week. Got a scandal to look like outraged out and wag her finger, and it's not her fault either, so she can just play bad cop and everyone will love it.
But I didn't know that when I picked her. And indeed, I guess because she has performed, by general account, very well in the Education Minister portfolio. I wasn't even thinking about immigration.
I had forgotten she was immigration when the story broke. I only thought she was Education Minister. Much
less about MB. Okay, what points did you get? So shall we start? Becky?
I got a whopping 3.
Yep. What about you, Thomas?
I also got 3.
Did you?
Yeah.
I was hopeful initially that 3 meant I came third.
Well, you did.
I know.
Well, no, second equal.
But then when Josiah said that it was actually your entire score, I was deeply saddened.
What did you get, Tim?
Summary. Becky and Thomas, equally lame. I got a 9, and that's all due to those ratbags in MB who spent my $31 million. It's your damn money. It means something. Thomas, I'll give this back to you. That's the Select Committee. Thanks for watching. Comment down below. Who would you pick for Fantasy Beehive? Let us know and we'll fill you in on the details. See you next week. Bye.